What began as a simple family celebration quickly turned into a chilling mystery that no one could have predicted. A man vanished without a trace on a day that should have been filled with joy. As the hours passed and worry turned to dread, what police uncovered behind closed doors and long-held resentment would leave a lasting impression on everyone involved. It was the morning of March 17, 2021, Cory Hampton's 9th birthday. His family had gathered at a modest home on Beecher Street in southwest Atlanta to celebrate. Excitement filled the air as relatives arrived, bringing gifts and snacks for the small party. But there was one person Cory was eagerly waiting for, his father, Daryl Hampton. Daryl had made a promise to bring the birthday cake, a tradition he never missed. By noon, the cake still hadn't arrived. At first, no one thought much of it. Maybe he got caught in traffic or stopped to pick up something else. But as the hours dragged on and texts and calls to Daryl's phone went unanswered, a quiet sense of concern began to creep in. Odessa, Daryl's older sister, became increasingly worried. She had called twice and left a voicemail, no reply. At around 4:30 p.m., with no word from her brother, she decided to drive to his home on Oak Ridge Avenue, a drive that should have taken no more than 15 minutes. When she arrived, she found Daryl's gray Toyota Camry parked in the driveway. The house looked undisturbed. The lights were on, the blinds partially open. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She rang the doorbell. Still silence. Walking around to the back, she tried again. Nothing. Fearing the worst, Odessa called the police to request a welfare check. Officers from Atlanta's Zone 4 precinct responded just before 6 p.m. They checked the outside of the home carefully. There were no signs of forced entry. Both the front and back doors were locked from the inside. Peering through the window, officers could see a neatly maintained living room, shoes lined up near the wall, a jacket on the chair, keys on a wallet resting on the kitchen table. A phone charger hung loosely by the doorway, and a television glowed faintly in the bedroom. Given the circumstances, and with Odessa's permission as next of kin, the officers entered the house. They did a thorough walkthrough, room by room. Nothing was obviously out of place. The house looked lived in, but empty. A pot of food, rice and beans, sat untouched on the stove. Mail had been brought inside. The bed was made. Daryl's work badge from Fulton County Water Services and his next day's clothes were folded neatly on a chair. But there was no sign of Daryl. His cell phone wasn't in the house, and while nothing pointed to foul play, something was off. He hadn't shown up for work that day. His regular shoes, worn almost daily, were still near the door, and there was no evidence he had packed a bag or left voluntarily. Because there were no immediate signs of criminal activity, police completed a missing person report but didn't launch a full investigation that evening. The timeline was pieced together from Odessa's last phone conversation with him around 8:30 p.m. the night before. Daryl had said he would be picking up the birthday cake the next morning. The mystery deepened the following day, March 18th, when Odessa returned to Daryl's home hoping for answers. While watering a plant near the front steps, she noticed a strong chemical odor, something sharp like bleach or a cleaner. She immediately contacted investigators. A second sweep of the property was conducted. This time, Officer Michael Glenn, an evidence technician, joined the team. While inspecting the area near the porch, Glenn noticed the distinct scent of industrial cleaner coming from the crawl space beneath the house. The wooden lattice covering the space seemed undisturbed, but the smell suggested otherwise. The case had shifted from a disappearance to something potentially far more serious. What police discovered beneath the crawl space was chilling. When officers lifted the wooden paneling under the porch, they found a large plastic storage container. Behind it, partially covered by an old, dirty tarp, lay something bundled in a stained white bedsheet. It wasn't long before they confirmed their worst fears. Inside was the lifeless body of 34-year-old Daryl Hampton. Fingerprint analysis and visual confirmation from his family would later verify his identity. The initial autopsy revealed that Daryl had been shot once in the chest at close range. There was no exit wound, suggesting the bullet had remained inside his body. Based on decomposition and body temperature, the medical examiner estimated that he had died the evening of March 16th, roughly 24 to 30 hours before he was found. Signs of cleanup were evident. Investigators noted several used cleaning supplies nearby, a half-empty bleach bottle, paper towels, and a single latex glove. Close to the entrance of the crawlspace, a single brass shell casing was found, an indication of the weapon used. However, no gun was recovered from the scene. Inside the house, there were no large blood stains, only faint traces of cleaning agents along the hallway floor. And perhaps most strikingly, the home showed no sign of forced entry. Electronics and cash were still in place. Jewelry and other valuables had been untouched. The television remained on, and nothing appeared ransacked. Everything about the scene suggested that the person responsible had known the house well. Whoever had taken Daryl's life either had a key or had been willingly let inside. Police theorized that the suspect had moved swiftly, avoided detection, cleaned up afterward, and left quietly, without alerting anyone until it was too late. In a follow-up search of the home's interior, detectives made a curious discovery inside Daryl's wallet: a well-worn, creased photograph. The image showed Daryl standing in a backyard with a young Cory and a woman, but something was off. The woman's face had been aggressively blacked out with ink, scratched over so thoroughly that the paper had thinned from the pressure. It was an angry, purposeful act. Detective Sarah Lee logged the photo as evidence and later showed it to Daryl Hampton, Daryl's sister, during an interview that same afternoon. Odessa recognized it immediately and, to prove it, pulled out the same photo from her purse, untouched. "That's Shenica Collins," she said. Daryl's ex-wife. According to Odessa, Shenica Collins had lost custody of Cory in 2019 following several concerning incidents. Police and court records later confirmed her history: multiple involuntary psychiatric holds and a domestic disturbance that had led to her arrest. After a final custody hearing, Daryl was granted full custody, and since then, Shenica had been largely absent from her son's life. But Odessa shared something new, something she hadn't mentioned before. Roughly 2 weeks earlier, a neighbor from her old apartment complex had told her they'd seen Shenica back in town. At the time, Odessa dismissed it as gossip. Now, with Daryl dead, that sighting took on a darker meaning. Investigators ran a search and found a match. A woman using the name Shenica Williams, her maiden name, had recently signed a lease at an apartment complex on Ann Avenue, SW, less than 3 miles from Daryl's home. She wasn't alone on the lease. Also listed was Julian Crane, 38, a man with a serious criminal history, aggravated assault, weapons charges, and numerous court orders filed by former partners. Both Fulton and DeKalb County had protective orders on record against him. Detectives marked him as a high-priority person of interest. A scan of traffic and surveillance footage in Daryl's neighborhood revealed something significant. On March 21st, detectives spotted a black pickup truck registered to Crane parked on a side street near Oak Ridge Avenue. The vehicle was seen passing through the area just after 10:15 p.m. on March 16th and again around 11 p.m., this time with its headlights off. Even more telling, a nearby residential security camera captured a blurry image of a hooded individual moving past a side gate at 10:47 p.m. Though grainy, the figure's build and stride matched Crane's general profile. Court documents painted a disturbing portrait of Julian Crane: violent, controlling, and known to carry firearms despite legal prohibitions. Multiple women had previously sought legal protection from him, describing threats, intimidation, and physical danger. Detectives then began connecting the dots between Julian and Shenica. While no formal marriage or property ownership was recorded, old social media posts suggested a long-standing relationship. A photo from 2014 showed the pair in a backyard, smiling together, suggesting their connection. By late March, investigators were closing in on a key suspect. Though she had never filed for a legal name change, several social media posts from 2020 showed Shenica Collins referring to herself as Shenica Crane. This suggested a close and ongoing relationship with Julian Crane, despite no official record of marriage. On March 22nd, detectives visited their listed residence on Arian Avenue, hoping to make contact. Neither Shenica nor Julian was home at the time. Neighbors offered mixed insights. Some recalled that the couple had lived there for several weeks but mostly kept to themselves. One resident mentioned hearing heated arguments coming from their unit earlier in the month, but never reported it. Another neighbor remembered spotting a black pickup truck parked out front frequently, usually late at night, though they couldn't recall exact dates. The next day, March 23rd, police secured a warrant to access both Julian and Shenica's phone records and location data. Julian's cell phone had no activity, calls, or texts after 9:30 p.m. on the night of March 16th. However, data from cell phone towers placed his phone near Oak Ridge Avenue between 10:20 and 11 p.m. It later reconnected to a tower near Arian Avenue at around 11:15 p.m., reinforcing the timeline. Investigators then turned to surveillance footage in the area surrounding Daryl Hampton's home. A Shell gas station just a few blocks from Oak Ridge Avenue had security footage showing a black Ford pickup truck making a turn onto Daryl Street at approximately 10:15 p.m. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the other data points investigators had already collected. Though the driver's face wasn't clearly visible, the license plate confirmed the vehicle was registered to Julian Crane. With mounting evidence, law enforcement prepared to bring both Julian and Shenica in for questioning. Meanwhile, investigators continued to gather communications, text messages, emails, and even deleted data restored from cloud backups. A warrant to access both individuals' devices was approved. Detectives began developing a theory. Julian may have acted on Shenica's behalf, possibly under her influence or direction. Though it wasn't clear whether she had physically been present at the scene, her sudden reappearance in Atlanta, the defaced photograph found in Daryl's wallet, and her volatile history with him painted her as central to the motive. On March 25, 2021, police apprehended Julian Crane without incident at a bus stop near Arian Avenue. He was taken into custody and brought in for questioning. Simultaneously, a search warrant was executed at the apartment he shared with Shenica Collins. During his first interview, Julian denied everything. He claimed he'd been home all night with Shenica, watching television. He stated he hadn't visited Daryl's house, hadn't spoken to him, and hadn't left the property. When questioned about the black pickup truck seen near the crime scene, Julian insisted it hadn't moved from the driveway that night. But data from the truck's GPS system told a different story. The vehicle had departed the residence shortly after 10 p.m., arrived near Oak Ridge Avenue around 10:15, and returned a little after 11 p.m. More troubling, the truck had paused in an alley directly behind Daryl's home, matching security footage previously collected from a nearby residential camera. When confronted with the evidence, Julian's demeanor shifted. He admitted to going to Daryl's house that night, but insisted it wasn't with violent intent. According to his revised account, Shenica had asked him to speak with Daryl, saying she only wanted to see her son, Cory. Julian claimed that when he arrived, Daryl became aggressive and lunged at him. He said he fired a single shot in self-defense. However, this version of events didn't match the physical evidence. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing broken, no displaced furniture, and no visible injuries on Julian. Moreover, the body had been wrapped in a bed sheet and hidden beneath the porch, suggesting a deliberate attempt to conceal the crime rather than a spur-of-the-moment reaction driven by fear. Back at the apartment, the search team uncovered a .38 caliber revolver hidden in a bedroom closet under a pile of blankets. The weapon was unsecured and one round had been fired. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the bullet recovered from Daryl's body matched the revolver found in Julian's possession. Investigators also recovered latex gloves, a partially used bottle of bleach, and a dark sweatshirt resembling the one seen on the hooded figure in surveillance footage the night of the shooting. With this compelling collection of digital, physical, and testimonial evidence, Julian Crane officially became the prime suspect in a murder that had started with a birthday cake and ended in tragedy. As investigators dug deeper, the picture became clearer and darker. Both Julian Crane and Shenica Collins had their cell phones seized for forensic analysis. What those devices revealed would ultimately dismantle their version of events. On March 26th, Shenica was brought in for formal questioning. At first, she stuck to her story. She claimed no knowledge of Daryl Hampton's death. She insisted she had spent the entire night of March 16th at home, fast asleep, and that Julian had never left the apartment. But when detectives confronted her with surveillance footage and GPS tracking data that placed Julian's truck near Daryl's home, Shenica's story began to unravel. After repeated questioning, she finally admitted she had asked Julian to speak with Daryl. According to her, it was a desperate plea driven by emotion, an attempt to reconnect with her son, Cory, after being shut out of his life. She claimed the situation had spiraled beyond her control, that Julian misunderstood what she meant. But the data from her phone told a far different story. Recovered messages between her and Julian painted a narrative of growing resentment and frustration. One message sent on March 15th, the evening before the murder, read, "He'll never give Cory up. I need you to fix this." Less than 12 hours after Daryl's body was discovered, another message from Shenica came in. "It's done. Just breathe." This digital paper trail, combined with Julian's changing account and physical evidence at the scene, made it clear to investigators that the act wasn't spontaneous, it was deliberate. More messages from Shenica's phone revealed a steady pattern of obsession and resentment. In a message dated March 12th, she wrote, "Every time I think about him having Cory, I can't take it." Phone records showed several brief calls between her and Julian in the days leading up to the killing. Even more telling were her online searches from early March. Search terms like Georgia custody laws, father's rights in Atlanta, and how to challenge a custody ruling. Though she had not filed any formal legal appeal in over a year, it was clear that Shenica had not let go of the custody battle, and that she had enlisted Julian to help her regain control. With a solid timeline established and motive clearly defined, prosecutors charged Julian Crane with first-degree murder, unlawful firearm possession, and tampering with evidence. Shenica was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted interference with custody. Bail was denied for both. While Julian had pulled the trigger, it was Shenica's manipulation, documented in texts and calls, that prosecutors described as the match that lit the fuse. As both suspects sat in custody, new information surfaced that added yet another layer to the case. Erling Mathis, a former neighbor of Daryl and Shenica from back in the early 2000s, came forward after hearing about the arrests. She told detectives about a backyard barbecue she attended when Cory was around 4 years old. She had taken several photos that day, and after checking her collection, found one that would become key to understanding the full scope of the relationship. The photo showed Daryl, Shenica, and young Cory standing in the yard, but off to the side, partly hidden behind a patio umbrella, was another figure, an adult male holding a drink. Investigators confirmed it was Julian Crane. Until that point, authorities had assumed Julian entered Shenica's life after she lost custody in 2019. But this photo proved that wasn't the case. Julian had been around much earlier, part of the family's life long before tensions over Cory reached a boiling point. Digging into old records, detectives found that both Julian and Shenica had been residents of a transitional housing facility in southeast Atlanta in late 2000. Staff interviews confirmed the two were frequently seen together doing group meetings and in shared areas. Messages from Shenica's phone revealed even more of their shared history. In one dated January 11th, she wrote to Julian, "You remember how it used to be before he took Cory from me." Another, weeks later, said simply, "You were there. You know how he was." Together, these threads formed a chilling narrative, one of resentment, unresolved trauma, and a relationship that had turned deadly. As the case unfolded, prosecutors began to piece together not just what happened, but why. Although some of the messages exchanged between Julian Crane and Shenica Collins were vague, investigators and prosecutors saw a pattern. To them, the tone, timing, and frequency of those texts revealed more than casual venting. They painted a picture of manipulation. In his interviews, Julian repeatedly stated that he believed Daryl Hampton was abusive and that his only intention was to help Shenica reconnect with her son Cory. But the facts didn't support that narrative. Daryl Hampton had no criminal background. There were no reports of domestic disturbances, no child welfare cases, no red flags in school or court records. Teachers, therapists, and court-appointed professionals described Cory's environment as consistent and safe. Every piece of official documentation reinforced the same truth. Daryl was a stable and loving father. Investigators believed Shenica had constructed a false version of events, portraying Daryl as a threat in order to justify her actions and manipulate Julian's response. Given Julian's background, marked by previous violent offenses, emotional instability, and erratic decision-making, he was particularly vulnerable to emotional influence. The district attorney's office compiled a comprehensive file of evidence. It included weeks of phone logs between Julian and Shenica, laced with emotionally charged messages. In one text, Shenica wrote, "He'll never give Cory up. I need you to fix this." Another, sent shortly after Daryl's death, read, "It's done. Just breathe." GPS data tied Julian's vehicle directly to Oak Ridge Avenue the night of the murder. Receipts showed purchases of bleach, gloves, and other cleaning supplies just days before. The revolver used in the shooting was matched to the bullet recovered from Daryl's body. A photo placing Julian at a family event years earlier also confirmed that he wasn't a stranger to the situation. He had known Daryl and Cory long before the killing. With this mounting evidence, charges were finalized. On April 9, 2021, a Fulton County grand jury indicted Julian Crane on multiple counts, including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and unlawful possession of a firearm. Shenica Collins faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, criminal solicitation, and attempted interference with custody. Prosecutors dismissed any suggestion that the crime had been spontaneous. They described it as a deliberate act, planned and carried out by two individuals bound by resentment and unresolved conflict. In the wake of the tragedy, Cory was placed under the care of his paternal grandmother, Odessa. Throughout the investigation, child services and licensed therapists monitored his well-being closely. He was not made aware of the details surrounding the case. In late April, custody was formally granted to Odessa. The trial process began that fall. On September 13, 2021, jury selection commenced in Fulton County Superior Court. Both Julian and Shenica had been in custody for nearly 6 months. Prosecutors requested that they be tried separately to avoid the risk of their defenses clashing and compromising the case. Julian's trial was scheduled first. His defense team leaned heavily on the idea that he was emotionally manipulated. They portrayed him as someone who acted out of misguided loyalty rather than intent. His lawyer acknowledged that Julian had gone to Daryl's home that night, but claimed it was only because he believed Cory was in danger. Central to this defense strategy was the portrayal of Shenica as the mastermind. Her history of mental health challenges, her loss of custody, and her emotional text messages were presented as key influences on Julian's actions. According to his legal team, he had no motive of his own. He had simply been drawn into her world and used as a pawn. But the prosecution told a different story. Assistant District Attorney Maya Robinson, leading the state's case, told the jury, "This was not a rescue. This was a removal." She laid out a calculated timeline, 72 hours of planning, preparation, and execution. She highlighted how Julian brought gloves, he brought bleach, he brought a firearm. And when it was over, he didn't panic. He hid the body under the porch. In court, a key piece of evidence was shown, an uncropped photo from a backyard gathering years earlier. In the corner stood Julian Crane, drink in hand. It proved he wasn't some outsider unaware of the family's dynamics. He had known Daryl, he had known Cory. This wasn't about saving a child, it was about reclaiming a life that no longer belonged to them, and doing so with deadly intent. Long before custody was lost, Julian Crane had already been part of Daryl, Cory, and Shenica's world. He wasn't just a distant partner pulled into a situation by emotion. His involvement ran deeper. That implication became clear during trial proceedings. On September 21, 2021, following 5 days of witness testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. It didn't take long. In under 3 hours, they returned with a unanimous verdict. Julian Crane was found guilty on all charges: first-degree murder, aggravated assault, tampering with evidence, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with no chance of parole. Less than a month later, in mid-October, Shenica Collins stood trial. Her defense team argued she never meant for anyone to get hurt. They claimed her texts were nothing more than emotional outbursts, desperate messages from a mother longing for her child. They acknowledged she had asked Julian to talk to Daryl, but denied any knowledge of what he planned to do. That argument quickly unraveled. Text messages showed Shenica referring to Daryl as an obstacle and urging Julian to fix it. Under cross-examination, she admitted to sending the messages, but insisted they weren't meant as instructions for violence. Prosecutors countered with the timing of her follow-up messages after the murder and her attempts to delete parts of the conversation thread. On October 19th, a separate jury found Shenica Collins guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted interference with custody. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison with eligibility for parole after serving 12. In his closing statement, Judge Ronald M. Kine spoke directly to the damage done. He called the crime a calculated attempt to destroy a family out of selfishness and obsession. While Shenica hadn't pulled the trigger, the judge said, she had manipulated someone unstable to carry out her intent. After the sentencing, Cory's custody case was officially closed. He remained under the care of his grandmother, Daryl Hampton. Weekly counseling sessions and trauma support were arranged through social services. Among Daryl's belongings returned to Odessa was the photo once found in his wallet. Cory, Daryl, and Shenica, her face scribbled out in black ink. Odessa placed it on her mantle, beside one of Cory's drawings. When asked if she wanted the photo restored, she shook her head. "It says everything," she replied.